Alzheimer's is a brain disease. There are about 100 known brain diseases that cause similar signs and symptoms to what we see in people living with Alzheimer's.
Welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske. Just so great to be your host, and thank you so very much for everybody who is supporting the show, getting some great feedback across a number of different channels. Love reading your feedback. Keep sending it through. Now on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming behavior specialist, 2 times best-selling author, international podcast host, and international TEDx speaker, Lisa Skinner. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you so much for inviting me on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's very exciting to have you here. Now, you and I are going to be talking about how families and caregivers can build better quality relationships with loved ones living with Alzheimer's and dementia through counterintuitive solutions and practical tools. So there is certainly a bit for us to unpack here. So where are you calling in from today, Lisa?
I am in California.
Fantastic. Has that been home forever?
I grew up here. I was on the East Coast for a total of about 6 years, but I've been back since 2001.
Now,
so, yeah, it definitely is my home.
So not so long ago, you had some wildfires go through in that area. Tell us about that.
We did.
That must have been terrifying.
It was. I live in Napa, which is the wine country. And we actually had one of the big fires come within a mile of our home on 3 sides, and we did evacuate. So, but a lot of people lost their homes. So we were very fortunate in that regard because ours didn't actually get hit, but it came very, very close.
Yeah, look, it was all over the news, that's for sure. And so now you talked about wine regions. I'm in a wine region called McLaren Vale, and tell us a little bit about where you're at. I'd love to hear more about it.
Well, I'm right in the heart of Napa, which is probably one of the most popular wine regions in the world. We have a lot of people come here every year to just hang out and discover our beautiful landscape. It is really a blessing to be able to live here. I'm not here because of wine. No. I'm here because I absolutely love the setting and the community. We have a wonderful community here, and everybody really supports each other. You know, like, for example, during the fires, people just pitched in and helped each other out. And so it's a really wonderful place to live.
I often find myself just journeying around on foot, having a look at the vineyards and things like that. We've got, seascape to our left and rolling hills to our right. Do you enjoy going for strolls? What sort of things you enjoy doing? You have hobbies? Tell us a little bit about that part of your life.
I have 2 dogs. Up until 2 weeks ago, I had 3 dogs, but we lost our eldest one to cancer, but she was 15. But it was still very heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
And then our youngest will be 2 in 2 days. And she's a 100-pound rare breed dog called a Shiloh Shepherd, which originated in upstate New York. She's our 3rd one. And she is so full of energy that she needs to go out for hikes on a regular basis. And then the one I was telling you about that I just put in the bedroom, she is 4, and she's a little multi-poo, and she's our 2nd multi-poo that we've had, and we really love the breed. They're extremely smart, very sweet, and just a character. She's an absolute character. But we've always had dogs. Love dogs. And, they really become an integral part of your family, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, I love talking about dogs. We have 3 Rottweilers. All despite the records and what people say, they are just big cuddle bugs. Now,
they are.
We also had some years ago now Maltese Shih Tzus. So I understand the spectrum. And they are quite intelligent little dogs, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
They really are. We had a cockapoo before our first multi-poo, And then we ended up shrinking down a size. So we went to the Maltipoo, which is a smaller dog than the average cockapoo. And we were sold. The
Yeah,
first one was
straight
just
away.
a love bug, and this one is that way too. So
Did you have pets growing up?
that's an interesting question. Yes, I pretty much always had a dog, but my mother did not like animals.
Oh,
So the dog was not allowed in the house. She never even pet the dog. She couldn't even get
really?
close to the dog.
Oh,
Yeah. So I didn't grow up with the influence of love, a love for animals. It was something that was just kind of natural for me. I've always loved animals, but not, it was difficult having a mother who just does not
just
like
doesn't.
animals.
Wow. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. Well, tell us a little
But
bit of,
she let us have one.
well,
So
credit to her for that. Tell us a little bit about growing up. Where did you grow up and what can you recall? Can you share a fond memory? For example, I remember a fond memory being for my family or myself as a sibling is to not be home before the streetlights came on because if you did, you ended up doing chores.
well, I grew up in the county right next to the one I live in now,
Right.
which is called Marin County. And it's the one that separates the Bay from San Francisco. So if you're in Marin County, that means to get to San Francisco, you have to go over the Golden Gate Bridge. I grew up in that county. And I grew up in a very kind of small community. It was a bedroom community at the time. Things have changed quite a bit. And it was a really just wonderful place to grow up. And it was a I have a lot of very, very fond memories of the years I spent
Abs-
growing up in Marin County. Small
Absolutely.
town.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, small, not small town like, oh, some of these really rural places that you um, run into going across
Hmm.
the country. But bedroom community, I'd say, is probably the
Best
best
way
way
to
to
just
describe it. And it
absolutely.
was, yeah, it was a really nice upbringing. I feel very fortunate
I
that.
remember going, what I recall of San Francisco is on one side of the bay, it's very hilly, and on the other side, there's a long coastal beach front. I mean, I know you've got Alcatraz, got all these other things happening there, but it is such a beautiful place. I can't remember if it's the opposite side to San Francisco, and it's in the windy, hilly areas. Is that the side you're talking about?
Yes.
It is. That's beautiful. I've been there and I loved it. Yeah, it's
You
fantastic.
probably, if you were in San Francisco, you had to cross the Golden Gate Bridge
Yes,
to get to that. Yes,
we did, and I
that's
remember
where I grew up in that county.
I remember doing the touristy thing with the bridge behind me, just waving. I loved it. There, it was fantastic. Thank you so very much for sharing. Now, tell me a little bit about as you've gone along. Often have inspirational people to give me ideas to become the person that I've become. Who in your life, as an author, has helped you, or even in your behavior specialist? Gave you that, I guess, that genesis thought to become a behavioral specialist or an author and all those sorts of things?
It was due to my very first introduction to Alzheimer's disease when I was a teenager, and I went over to my grandmother's house one day. I had actually just gotten my driver's license, and I wanted to show it off to her. She only lived a couple miles from my family's home. So I told my mom I was going to drive over to grandma's and show off to her that I had just gotten my driver's license. She didn't say a word to me about anything unusual. So I just went over there expecting it to be a normal visit with my Nana. And we walk into her living room and we sit down, and she starts telling me about these birds that were living in her mattress, and they would come out at night and peck on her face. And then she pointed to her walls and her living room floor, and she asked me if I saw the rats running around the house and they were invading her space and she didn't know how to get rid of them. And then she moved on to tell me about these men that were breaking into her home. They were stealing all of her possessions. They were breaking into her jewelry box, stealing her prized jewelry. And she was absolutely convinced that they were eventually going to do away with her and just take over her life. And I just sat there with my jaw to the floor. And I didn't know for the life of me whether I should believe the most far-fetched stories I had ever heard. This was so unusual for my grandmother and out of character. She was always such a shy, demure little lady. And I couldn't believe that I was what was coming out of her mouth.
No.
So that was my first experience. Turns out, I went home and confronted my mother, and it turns out that my grandmother had been diagnosed with what they called back then senile dementia. And then 7 more of my family members followed in her footsteps. So I had this early introduction to dementia. That particular experience with my grandmother stuck with me my entire life because it caught me so off guard because I didn't know there was anything wrong with her until that day. And then when I was in college, I took a course in human behavior and I was sold. I've always been intrigued with what makes people tick. Why do they behave certain ways in different settings, like, corporate settings or social settings? So I ended up getting my degree in human behavior. And I had this opportunity to be a community counselor at a assisted living memory care facility because we had moved to upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be a perfect match for me. And as I started working with the families who were going through this situation with their loved ones, we had pretty much with everybody an initial bond, an initial connection, because I had gone through it 8 times with my own family members. And I really understood what they were going through, and I helped them to understand what their loved ones were going through, because a lot of people really, when it comes to brain disease, they don't clearly understand what's happening to the person that is going through it. Most people associate Alzheimer's disease or one of the other 100 brain diseases that causes dementia or similar symptoms with short-term memory loss and confusion. It is so much more complex than that. Like the hallucinations that my grandmother was having, the false beliefs and delusions that my grandmother was having, the paranoia and suspiciousness that my grandmother was displaying to me when I was visiting her. A lot of people don't make that association that all these things plus a lot more symptoms, signs, and things like that are actually a part of the disease. So I figured out early on in my professional career, and I have been doing this for 30 years now professionally, that the key is to definitely start with people having a more comprehensive understanding of what to expect during this journey. And it is a long, drawn out journey. It's my grandmother lived with it for 20 years, and the average person is anywhere from 8 to 15, but I know of somebody whose mother had it for 30. So it varies from person to person. But I think one of the most important things for family members and caregivers to really be able to take more of a proactive approach to the care and the relationship that they're trying to maintain with their loved one is to know how to recognize these behaviors that surface, what to expect on a day-to-day basis, and then most importantly, how to respond effectively to things like hallucinations and false beliefs and aggression and anxiety and all the things that come up on any given day when you live with a brain disease that's damaging your brain and you're suffering from cognitive decline, and it's progressive. It continues to worsen as you progress through the stages. So that really was the impetus behind the books.
Yep.
And then I also now host top-rated podcasts. It's rated in the top 10% of most popular podcasts that are listened to globally. And I just recently started my own television show. I'm on my 12th episode on the TV show. And both of those shows are called The Truth, Lies, and Alzheimer's Show. And I talk about every aspect of living with dementia and how people can provide. So family members, I train a lot of doctors. I speak at a lot of medical conventions all over the world because they don't receive training in this arena. And
it's a lived experience. So you can't buy experience, can you?
No.
Yeah,
No.
That's the thing I take away here.
As a matter of fact, I just read a couple days ago that the number one leading cause of death in Australia now is Alzheimer's disease in the elderly population.
May I ask some questions? I wonder if you could, just for the sake of our educational learning curve, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of very interested people listening in to this call, if you could answer, it's kind of a two-part question. What's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia care, and does sugar play a part? Our consumption of sugar?
Those are great questions. And it actually is one of the most frequent questions that I'm asked is, what is the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Because a lot of people believe that dementia is a separate disease. So let me explain it to you. Alzheimer's is a brain disease. There are about 100 known brain diseases that cause similar signs and symptoms to what we see in people living with Alzheimer's disease. Now, those symptoms we put in this bucket that we call dementia. So dementia actually refers to the symptoms that show up. So let's say you have a cold. You're not really sure if you have a cold or if you have the flu, but you have these symptoms. And they overlap. I mean, some people get similar symptoms that people get with a cold and vice versa. So you go to your doctor and you describe your symptoms. And then your doctor should be able to tell you if you have a cold or if you have the flu or something else, another virus that's causing these same symptoms or similar symptoms. So that's a good kind of analogy to use. So think of Alzheimer's as the disease. And then when we use the term dementia, we are really referring to all these symptoms that are caused by the damage being done to the brain of a person living with the Alzheimer's disease, the Lewy body disease, the vascular dementia. So that's probably the easiest way to explain.
Yes,
so
look, I can only imagine how deep the rabbit hole goes on this. And now I mentioned sugar because I really was more, I know it's hereditary in many respects, but I always think about what we consume. What are we putting into our bodies that might actually inhibit our growth or, further our growth and maintain our health and awareness? Is there any relationship to diet and this type of thing?
Huge. So there are many risk factors that either increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease or one of these other brain diseases, or minimizing that risk. And our diet is a huge risk factor for determining if we are at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease or a lower risk. And sugar is definitely one of the foods that we know inflates that risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And the reason why is because sugar causes inflammation in our brains and our bodies. And inflammation, there's been a correlation through decades and decades of studies that show a correlation between inflammation and a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So you are absolutely correct in that suspicion, because diet definitely plays a role in increasing our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Now, let me just emphasize to everybody, if you eat a lot of sugar, if you eat a lot of ultra-processed foods, which are probably some of the worst foods that we can eat to raise our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, if you lived on these things your whole life, does that mean that you are going to develop Alzheimer's disease? It absolutely does not mean that. These diseases, these brain diseases, I have to tell you honestly, they don't discriminate against anybody. They pick and choose who they want. What I'm saying is there are things that do increase our risk of developing it. And if you manage those things, like eat a little healthier diet, get regular exercise, I mean, there's a huge list of things that are considered to be risk factors that play a role into determining our level of risk. Then your chances are less that you will develop Alzheimer's disease, but you're not completely protected under any means.
You know, I like to be a upbeat, cheery type of person, but I know the seriousness of this disease. And again, it's progressive. It's not reversible, is it?
No, it's not.
That's the thing that scares me the most. Now, in all of this, you talk about counterintuitive solutions for managing dementia symptoms. Tell us a little bit about that.
What I mean by counterintuitive is, and I'll use my grandmother's story as an example. So, I'm sitting in her living room, and all of a sudden I'm listening to probably one of the most far-fetched stories I've ever heard, that these birds actually live in her mattress and they come out at night and peck on her face. Plus the rats, plus the men that were breaking into her home. So what I was witnessing, and this is very common in people who live with dementia, the birds were a false belief or a delusion. She believed they were there. She believed she saw them, and she believed she actually felt them peck at her face. The rats I was witnessing a hallucination, another common symptom with Alzheimer's disease. And then the men breaking into her house and stealing her jewelry, and that whole story was an example of a person becoming paranoid and suspicious. And that is very common. So our gut instinct, the way that we are wired, not only do we want to fix people, I mean, she was my grandmother, and I wanted her to be okay. And also, our instinctive reaction would be to correct them with such far-fetched stories. It's like, Grandma, what are you talking about? That is not even possible that birds could be living in your mattress.
In your mattress, wow.
So the counterintuitive and the correct and effective response is what I've been trained in. I'm a certified dementia practitioner, and it's a person-centered approach to dementia care. And we learned that correcting somebody and arguing with them is completely opposite of the effective way to respond to somebody, because the difference is our realities are not aligned. Even though she's telling me this story that sounds absolutely impossible and incredible to me with a healthy brain, so that's my reality. Her reality is that she 100% believed that these things were true. And we learned through trial and fire, trying different therapy approaches over the decades, that the reality orientation therapy, in other words, trying to steer a person back into the healthy person's reality, only exacerbated the situation. They would get frustrated and angry and feel that, you don't believe me, and just continue to feel frustration. And it could actually escalate that situation into what we call, having a catastrophic reaction. And that's synonymous with a total meltdown.
Yeah.
So this new methodology was tested and created, and this is what I was trained in, to do what we call join their reality and meet them where their mind is, because that's their truth. It doesn't align with our truth, but there's nothing anybody can say. And we learned this. There's nothing anybody can do or say to convince a person who's having a false belief due to the damage being done to their brain, that whatever they believe isn't true.
Yeah.
So another good example, if I may,
Yes.
and I want to just kind of illustrate another very important point to what I'm saying. So a lot of people who live with dementia, one of their false beliefs is that their late spouse is still alive.
Oh.
And they can actually believe that that spouse is at the store and will be home any minute, or they're waiting for them at home. And to say, let's say it's my mother, to say, oh, Mom, don't you remember Dad passed away 5 years ago? I don't know what you're talking about. He couldn't possibly be walking in the door in the next 10 minutes. He's gone. He's been gone a long time. Don't you remember? Don't you remember? And keep, kind of harping on that.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't remember. She believes her husband is still alive and that he really is at the store and should be home with dinner in 10 or 15 minutes. And for us to correct that and to say, oh, Mom, don't you remember Dad passed away 5 years ago? That could be come across to her like she is learning for the very first time that her husband died and nobody told her. And how could this happen? What do you mean he's gone? Blah, blah, blah. He just went to the store. Because in her mind, the way the brain works as a result of the way it's changing during this process and the damage being done, is she honestly believes that her husband is alive.
He's alive.
And for me to say that to her and remind her, first of all, don't you remember? You don't want to say that to somebody with dementia because they don't remember. And then to maybe trigger a panic attack because all of a sudden I'm telling her that her husband, who she thinks is at the store, is now gone and nobody told her. So you see where I'm going with this?
Look, I sit here and I don't often get emotional, but I feel sadness because there must be just so much emotional load on the families that are going through this with them. And I think to myself, life is so precious, and that's one of the things that we really need to be focused on taking away from these experiences. Now, if I may ask, you're a 2 times best-selling author. Your first book was called Not All Who Wander Need Be Lost. Why did you call it that? For the same reason we've been talking about?
Yes. And it's actually a spin on something that J.R. Tolkien said. And I spun it because people are under the impression that once an Alzheimer's diagnosis is made, they're gone. They're lost. They will never be the same. And they're going to be confused for the rest of their life. And they're not going to be able to communicate and do all these things. So I spun that title to kind of get the point across that not all who wander, because that is a behavior of dementia, wandering, need be lost, because there are these strategies and these tools and these methodologies that we know can help provide very meaningful and purposeful lives for people despite having a brain disease.
Yeah.
That it's not all doom and gloom, and a lot of people believe that, and that people really do have the opportunity to live very meaningful and purposeful lives. But it takes very specialized skills to know how to effectively respond, to know what type of environment they thrive in. And most people aren't aware that those things even exist out there, let alone know how to put them in place and provide a meaningful life. But it works. It's a win-win for everybody.
I know that,
Because,
can I just add, I know that professionals
yeah,
like you have to separate yourself from the families that you're working with. How do you do that? How do you not do you get upset working with these situations, or do you see joy sometimes? I'd like to know how you experience it on behalf of other families that are going
I
through it.
see joy in everybody who lives with dementia, because I have learned the skills to know how to make that real.
Yeah.
And I've seen the magic. Yes, to be honest with you, there are a lot of family dynamics involved. Usually siblings will divide into, two camps, one that, or maybe even more camps. A lot of times it's because they have their own agenda, but others because they believe in some of the myths and disinformation that circulates around there and has been as long as I've been involved. And so they believe things that aren't true. And they also don't see a way around what they are experiencing or witnessing when they don't realize that there are ways, that things that we can do as family members and caregivers to turn the situation into one that has very positive outcomes versus everything
Everything
is a
else.
fight,
Yep.
everything is a conflict, everything is a struggle.
Yep.
And that's very, very hard on family members to witness this and experience this for the average 8 to 15 years or more, because they don't know what they don't know.
No, that's exactly right. Thank you so very much. Now, in your latest book called True Lies and Alzheimer's, what's the secret faces that you talk about?
The secret faces are all these behaviors that people don't
Understand.
realize are part of the disease.
Yeah.
There's a laundry list of them. So to all of a sudden be sitting there and your mother says, "Oh, Dad should be back in 10 minutes. He went to the store." And
Red
you know
flag.
that's not going to happen. Those are all part of the secret faces that people
Ah.
are not associating with being part of the disease. So
Can
go
you
ahead.
tell me, because I have so many questions for you, what are how early should somebody be questioning what's happening with a loved one, and what are I guess, the very, very, very earliest symptoms that are common, or the most common that you've seen?
Well, this, as it turns out, is a huge dilemma for everybody, including the doctors. Most people, and this is a true fact, are not diagnosed with Alzheimer's or one of these other brain diseases until they're well into the mid stages. And the reason for that is the signs and the symptoms and the behaviors that we see in the very beginning of a brain disease, they're very subtle. And it's almost impossible to differentiate between normal aging forgetfulness, and then there's a mid stage that we refer to as mild cognitive impairment. And then there's also full-blown dementia. If somebody progresses into full-blown dementia, the underlying cause is due to one of these brain diseases. But people live with mild cognitive impairment and show a lot of similar symptoms and behaviors to what we see in dementia. But they may have a urinary tract infection that's causing the symptomology. They may have a thyroid condition. There's a lot of different medical conditions that mirror the similar symptoms to what we see in dementia. The difference is some of these underlying medical conditions, like a thyroid condition, can be treated and then the symptoms will go away. That's not the case with Alzheimer's disease, Lewy body disease, some of these other brain diseases. They are progressive. And as you said, Rick, irreversible, and they will continue to get worse as time goes on and they go through the stages. So that's what really makes this difficult. And I will tell everybody that one of the things that you want to watch for, because I think most of us have experienced normal aging forgetfulness, especially once we hit 40, right? Like,
Oh,
why
yeah.
did I walk into this room?
Well,
And
why
why
am
did
I
I come
here?
in here?
I do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, why did I set my beer down or, my phone? This happens to all of us.
Why
And it's
don't? Yeah.
perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Or we'll be in a conversation and we're telling a story, and all of a sudden the person that you're telling the story about, your friend or something, and the name just flies out of your head, and the harder you try,
What was I
the
talking
harder
about
it is.
again?
Exactly. Well,
Oh,
this is actually part of normal aging
right.
and not to be concerned about. The time for concern is if those experiences start to happen more frequently and they become more severe, especially when they reach the point where it's interfering with a person's ability to function normally on a daily basis,
Right.
to be able to, like, getting lost in familiar places, repeating things, asking the same question over and over again in the same conversation, or repeating the same story over and over. Those are signs that there may be something more serious going on. Or you can't even, write a simple grocery list anymore. You can't remember the things you need to put into a certain recipe. So those are some of the things that start to happen to people who actually have dementia, and that's typically when the time is probably right to see the primary care physician and have them do an assessment.
And seek some help. Well, look, you've certainly covered off a lot of the I guess the hot topic questions of this particularly devastating brain illness. It just blows my mind that over the years that we've come so far with all these different technologies and the ways to get around things, fix things, if you will. Are we seeing any progress with caregiving nowadays? And what would you want to see in the field of dementia care today that's not there?
What's very concerning to me is that the World Health Organization and the Alzheimer's associations around the world are pretty much warning us that by the year 2050, which is only 25 years away,
Not long.
not long, it'll be here in the blink of an eye. If a cure or a treatment is not found for Alzheimer's disease or some of these other brain diseases that cause symptoms like dementia, or that we see in dementia, the number of people who will develop Alzheimer's disease between now and 2050 is expected to triple from the number of people who live with it today. So to me, what I see, and I've been around this for 30 years professionally, we are not prepared for the tsunami of Alzheimer's disease that's on its way. As family members, as caregivers, we have such a long, long way to go. And nobody has really designed, an environment to take care of these folks. Right now, as we are here talking, most of the care, with the exception of having a long-term care insurance policy, if you just happen to already have one when you're diagnosed, or if you qualify for veterans benefits, some people do and some people don't, then the care is completely out of your own pocket, and it's prohibitively expensive. And eventually people, when they progress into the late stage of Alzheimer's disease, they do need 24-hour-a-day care, 7 days a week, because it gets to the point where they're not able to really do anything for themselves. I see a lot of, since COVID, I am seeing a shift of care going from the institutions to like assisted living and memory care, to bringing caregivers into the home of the person living with the dementia, or they're moving their loved one in with them. And a lot of the adult children who are in the situation are still raising their own children. We call them the sandwich generation. They have elderly parents who need help, and they still have younger children that need their care, and a lot of them are working. So this is definitely something that we need to put a lot more focus on, because 25 years
It's not a long time.
It's not a long time. And unless a cure or treatment is found, that's what we're facing. The numbers literally tripling between now and then. And
I wish upon a star that's bright above that we could, click our fingers and this issue was resolved. But I know that you're fighting the good fight on behalf of so many people out there, so many families. And, it is a real credit to you. You've certainly got me a little bit emotional today, I have to say. And I'd like to say thank you for sharing. But when people want to learn more about this and build a relationship with you directly, get your books, get involved, where do they go? What's the first thing you would say to them?
Please visit my website. It's mindingdementia.com. A couple of benefits going to that site. I do send out a weekly newsletter filled with tips and techniques and all the skills that I have learned in the last 30 years. Go out in a weekly newsletter that all you have to do is go on and hit the subscribe button, and that email will be sent to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you have found yourself kind of thrust into these situations, hopefully a lot of that information will be valuable and helpful to you, and to help you have a better understanding about what you're in the middle of, in the eye of the storm.
As I say, yes.
And then you can also listen to either my podcast or my weekly television show. And we upload, it streams on a network called E360 TV, but we also upload each episode to YouTube. And every single week I talk about a different topic. So, and then you can go back and listen to, I have almost 140 episodes.
Yeah, they add up, don't they?
Yeah, so that's that's a resource for everybody to tap into, because you will hopefully learn a lot of valuable things that can help you through your journey and make it a little easier to get through, with less stress and strife that you might be experiencing now. So you've got the podcast, and there's a lot of information on my website, my books, but so there's a lot of resources that I provide for people out there, because I really know what it's like to struggle and be caught off guard with a dementia diagnosis. So the things that I provide will hopefully help everybody become proactive in this journey versus scrambling around, not knowing what to do, not knowing who to believe, and just living in a state of reaction.
And
I don't want
fear.
that for them.
No,
I
well, look,
really,
thank you so very much. Anybody that's watching this show today, it's rocked me. You hear these things from afar, but when you hear the learned experiences that people are going through, families, maybe even like yours, if you're watching today, make sure that you reach out to Lisa via the links that I provide below this post. No matter where you see the call, those links are going to be back to the books, the resources, and the website. And with all that being said, Lisa, great call. Thank you so very much for joining me on the show today.
thanks again for having me, Rick. It's been a pleasure.